Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everyone. And again, thank you so much for coming back to the second session of the Inter-Provincial Conference, Advancing Human Rights, to continue the conversation. Yesterday, I forgot to mention someone who was very important here, Ma'am Juliarine Walker. I think most of you know her, friend for Mrs. Christine. She's president of the 8th Pan-African Congress, and a very influential person that most of you'd like to know. She's from United States of America, Columbus. And actually, if you need to know more about this international decade, those are the people who were behind it, its formation at the first days when the idea was being crafted to become the international decade for people of African descent. So I think we needed to recognize her for being part of this in Regina. Thank you so much, Ma'am. Yes, it's important to recognize as we are celebrating and fighting for justice, to recognize those pioneers who were there, who died for their freedom, many of them. I came back here today. I know I will come back again to tell the history, but this time I came back to give you some hint or highlight in the history for people of African descent. Because you know, as I know again, that we always say in history that a person without history, who doesn't know his historical roots, is very much to the tree, look like a tree which has no the tap roots. So you can think about that dilemma. When you have a tree but it has no roots, rootsy, it is what always brings us to define our heritage, our identity, our intangible heritage, to reclaim what we call the body. Sometimes there is what we call in history passing, when you claim the historical identity where you don't belong. Where you don't belong, and you insist mentally to claim that history. That, oh yeah, I'm a white person. Oh yes, I'm a Caucasian. Oh, I'm a Chinese. Because you don't know the history will put you in the right place where you belong. The identity, your heritage. Let's leave this room without forgetting why we are here and why this morning we started with the history. Because we need to take a metamorphose, or take our mental flights back 500 years ago, back 200 years ago, back 100 years ago, back 5 or 50 years ago. Where have you been? It's very important to define what you are. It's not racism to say I am an African descent. And it is not. It actually smells nice than saying I'm a high white. Yeah. So when you speak accent, make sure that that accent rooted somewhere and actually define you. If it doesn't define you here, one day, one time, it will define you in Ghana. Yes, it's true. Just can we bring my picture? I would like to recognize this place, Dr. Shade. His picture behind there. That we need to recognize the historical contribution. If we cannot contribute and recognize those people, we actually forget part of the history, which means studying the past and understanding the present. If we cannot look into the legacy of those people to recognize them, because I'm saying this because of one reason, that a lot of people of African descent, we forget, even when we leave this room, we will forget what has been here. We will forget to come back to unite. We will forget to work together. We will forget the mental health we learn here. We will forget our brothers on the street. And if we can't forget, as I know again, we have reminded, someone mentioned here, Dr. Shade. But behind every historian, there is other people made that historian. And there is history behind. There is an event which made that historian to happen. Either it was negative or it was a positive. Because African descent, we can either go for two. If history is negative, let's clean the history and make it positive. The picture I'm showing here on the screen is Harry Jerome. We need to recognize these people. And I've seen, I think is Lisa, or the mom who going outside. The name is Lisa? Carol, yes. Okay, don't go out because this is about you. So if you look her, the height she has, and you look at Harry Jerome, that picture itself tells you a story. She lives in Saskatchewan, and he came from Saskatchewan. So when we are studying the historical significance, places and individual roots, and we have pictures, I cannot have the picture of Harry Jerome, but if I get the picture of Carol, it may lead me to the conclusion where Carol came from and lead me to where Harry Jerome came from. Exactly. Thank you so much, Carol. She lives here. That's why I'm saying, if you sent me here to investigate the history of people of African descent, and I cannot find anybody, the primary investigative person, subject, will be her. And I look at her, she will let me know what she's been doing here in the history, the library, the history she's been learning. I trust you within a few days or few hours, I will get to know to the other people of her community. Yes, thank you so much. I'll give you an example. Yes. So, yeah, so Harry Jerome, like Carol just making that comparison, Jerome was from here, from Saskatchewan. And is a resident of BC, most celebrated resident of British Columbia, Vancouver, in North Vancouver. Harry Jerome, his father, in 1912, migrated to British Columbia, and he became the world champion athletics person of the year multiple times in the British Empire Games, Australia, and Japan. Harry Jerome Jr. is most of people they know. The 1950s, 60s, this is the one they know. The senior was the champion multiple times in world British Empire Games. At the time when I said that they were known as Negro, without any color. And the reason the name was mentioned to them, it was simple. I mentioned it here. Professors from University of Maryland, they studied the culture traditions when people of African descent arrived in the United States, and they look at them. Because of our tradition, we greet people kneeling down, polite. The polite you see in Canada, it was part of the African descent community. They described us as negrosis, a psychological problem that does not allow a human, a subhuman, to function on his own. He has some psychological dysfunctions. That's what the root of the word Negro. And unfortunately, when the South Americans failed to maintain that type of accent, they translated it in the West, they call it into Canada, black. And the Latino, they call it Negro because it's a Negro word. And that word, Americans borrowed it, they put on us. From there, they say Negro is not nice, black is the best definition. But I can say all of us, we know English. There is no any person called a black person. If we are defining the English language, I'm not an English person. English is a black is adjective, isn't it? Christine is what? White. This is an extension of a pronoun or a noun for something. but they called us some of that nature because it was what they define Negro is not a human. So this time, this is what the Negro were doing. And they took the idea, even a subhuman can be a world champion. Why can't we learn from the history to become community champion in Saskatchewan, in Regina, in British Columbia, as these people did without any form of education? Can you go back to my presentation? That's one of the stories from BC and the connection from Saskatchewan. I wanted to make my credential for being here. For being here, why I'm here, there is history that connects me from BC. And the fact that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere, it also justifies my presence of being here. The map here we have here on the screen, International Decade for People of African Descent. Look at that picture. I wanted to ask you a question. What does that picture you see, the sparrows you see in the map? Thanks so much, Christine, for bringing that, making that. The sparrow you see on the banner, it means Africa in the middle. You people of African descent who don't believe that you are Africans, you 500 years ago you get out of the continent. 500 years ago, slave trade in Canada entered in Canada from where? From Africa. You entered from where? From the continent of Africa. In 1504, slave traders, they got African people from where? From Africa to Europe. That's you see the sparrows going. And then today you are coming from the continent, running there, coming here. So is in and out of the continent. Who is in and out? If you don't come from Africa, where did you come from? In heaven? It's a psychological mentality we have to define where you come from. Tell us where you came from. If it's not there, is it in heaven? Chinese, they have what you call the black dwarf of China. They call themselves African black dwarf in Chinese, in Canton, large population. They refused to join the Chinese. African Americans struggle to define his own history. That is the map I wanted to demonstrate there, that Africans, as you can see, they left and then they came to South America, 12 million people. And then others went to North America. But there is a country, there is no point I think here. There is a country called Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is right there. Many people confuse even African leaders. Where did the African people come from to Sierra Leone? I mean, the African people were from America to Sierra Leone. No. These were Canadians. 500 years ago when they brought them here, they fought the war, 1812, 1782. The Canadian people, white people, failed to secure Canada against the United States. And the British were smart enough to say, let's bring the Negroes. Because they are slaves, they run away and we use them to defeat the Americans and conquer Canada. But we needed to sign an agreement with them. That's what we call the Book of Negroes. It's a true story. Thomas Peters from Nigeria, who was the senior master of the slave who came here, he said, we can't fight the white man's war unless we sign an agreement that you give us the land. The agreement were there and they are still there. In Nova Scotia, the land was given to them. Granville Sharp, he said, no, there is no land anymore. Let them return back to Sierra Leone in one of the British colonies. And they give them Sierra Leone, Freetown. When he started building Freetown, they brought Henry Thornton and the rest of other people. They set up emergency confrontation and conflict within the return, the newcomers back, what you call the Freetown. Sierra Leone again was decolonized. British Columbia. This is British Columbia. Sir James Douglas The first governor of British Columbia, his mother was from Guyana. He was an African woman from a slave trade. She was raped by one of the British agent who was working on behalf of the colony in the slave plantation. And eventually, a British, when the Negro get pregnant, James Douglas was born. He became a governor. In 1858, he made a proclamation to become the first governor of the province of British Columbia. And he said, I'm sensitive, aware for the destruction of my people. In the United States, Oklahoma, San Francisco, Missouri, and other states. That's why you hear a person who was here, he mentioned people came from there. The call was made by Sir James Douglas because of those factors. This is the statistics of the population in British Columbia, ethnic groups. When you look down there, you will see the African people of African descent, they are 2.5, comprised of 47,000 in the province. Vancouver itself has a population of 35,000. But when you come there, they are still invisible. This is the picture I showed yesterday. The pioneer of Vancouver City. Vancouver was a Granville village. And this family came from Saskatchewan. They became billionaires. They built the first African Hall in 1866. And the province borrowed it to conduct trials. And now it is a prison and high court. The land was taken. That was the first African community. It's called the Beat Lane. The man you see right there, if you know lacrosse game, is the pioneer of the game. One of the pioneers of the game, lacrosse game. He was kicked out as a potter and started the champion in the game. The government of Canada chased them out of their game they created, citing that the Negro are too powerful and they are so quick. Their team always win and win. We needed to kick them out to give opportunity to other teams. That is where Canada came from. And you can see right at the last corner, you will see a younger boy, that was him, Elijah Scurry. In the school of BC Vancouver, he was the only student at the time. The Negroes live next door. Vancouver had no knowledge by 1950 about where the African people live. But 700 Negroes, as they are calling that time, were occupied Main Street, downtown Main Street and Terminal at what you call the CPR. They were there because the Pullman porters, George Pullman, the engineer who constructed the railway station, invited them to give them jobs because the Negro was always cheap and he always appreciated to work as a porter in a railway station. That was the luxury job for them at the time. And this, by 50 years then, they said the Negro live next door of whom we don't know nothing about. This is Hoganizale, the community they built in downtown East Side. After surviving and fighting and challenging, it became role model human rights activist. Joining the Congress of Sleeping Car Porters, they bought area, a church, African Fountain Chapel. They bought the church $500. And that was the time Nola Hendricks arrived in Vancouver, asking where the Negro live. And he said the Negroes, they don't have any place they live everywhere. And he said, what makes a chicken to cross a street? What makes a duck to cross a street? Let's come together and fundraise. If you don't know how to fundraise, you can become a musician, be a poet, be storyteller, start vaudeville dancers, start comedian. Let's fundraise to buy a space of our own. If we can't own a culture center, we will own a church. Yes, we will be there. Nola Hendricks went back to the United States, and she convinced the African Methodist Episcopal Church that there is a church in Vancouver close to the Negro neighborhood. It's only $1,000. That is $11 million today. And he said, if you give us half of that money, the Negro are willing to fundraise. Within 2 years, 5 years, the church was already being bought. They matched the fund from USA. I can tell you, 70 years the city destroyed this neighborhood. I restored the church. I started with the congregation. And now if you go there, Christine was there. She enjoyed the prayer. So, these are the Negro where they were working. This is 1950s, as I said yesterday, urban renewal. The city of Vancouver realized the growth of Negroes. The Negro who came free on the sky train, on the train, this time he became untouchable. That's how they were known. Untouchable in sports. Jerome was shaking the country. Untouchable in what you call diving, swimming. Joy Fortes, he came to Vancouver 1890 with the idea he was going to Victoria. The ship died in Vancouver. He went to the beach, started swimming. Parents, he said, when you go to the beach, stand where is the Negro. He really know how to save people's lives. He became the first friend, the best friend of Canadian all the time, because he saved even counselors, even the American ambassador in 1875 when he borrowed, 1904, when he drowned in Vancouver, he was rescued by Joy Fortes. Joy Fortes was buried. About 70,000 people went to his burial. That's what you can do if you are being called a Negro. And why I'm insisting on that word, even if you cannot be called right now, there is what you call the cracks of racism. When you construct a house, there are cracks there. You will know that this house is not well properly constructed. So racism is still indirect. There are cracks. When you come to get a job, they say, okay, you have a nice rice meal, come back the next day, we will see the manager. You find out the job position is filled out. Those are cracks are still there. This is the community they constructed. Christina was there during my walking tour. I started a walking tour to tell the city, if Jesus died, let's praise her in the church. The information will stay to the legacy. And these walking tours forced the city of Vancouver humiliation to recognize the construction of a culture center in the name of this. And I'm talking right now, there is a new building completed, two floors, 252 units have been given to African descent community. They live there as of now. That is the church. That is the church Nola Hendricks did. She formed the church. She formed the choir. African Fountain Chapel 1911. You call yourself not African, they know their identity. They know, no matter how the community look like, they know who were they know where they came from. As empirical fact, some of them left in 1950 when the city was destroyed, their community. They didn't go to United States. Some went to Ghana. Vice Chicken arrived there. She started a business. The church Nola Hendricks I showed you yesterday, Barbara Howard, not only Jerome, Barbara Howard became the world champion multiple times in the British Empire Games, representing Canada. It was seen in the newspaper, a Negro is in Australia, became the world champion. We said he's a Canadian. How come the Negro live next door and we don't know about what they do? And we appreciate their contribution. We need to start right now to think about that. The contribution, Jimi Hendrix. Nola arrived in Vancouver. Jimi Hendrix followed as a younger boy, started practicing guitar. Where? In the church. That's what we said yesterday. Art is a power of a community contribution. Do not underestimate it. Jimi practiced the guitar, but many people think he's American. He's a true son of Vancouver, made in Vancouver. Because Louis Armstrong was in Vancouver, Sammy Davis Jr. was in Vancouver, Billie Holiday was in Vancouver, Nata King Cole was in Vancouver, and Anne King. Anne King is also from here in Saskatchewan. They are all in Vancouver. He learned the guitar, and at the end of the day, the community was built. The picture you see, Mrs. Christine, that is when they were celebrating attainment of a community center. The church was fully built, paid the money, everything became, they got a land title. I have the land title right here in my bag. So if you need to see them, I can go to my hotel and bring them. I have them here. It's evidence. So this is the community. What happened, unfortunately, the city realizing that the Negro was no longer Negro. He became an African person in the community. They became threats. If we will join all of us here and we go to occupy a neighborhood where Shade house used to locate, I'm telling you, those neighbors, they have the history. They will tell you the land he owned right there. Start to claim those land before we go anywhere. But the issue, it all starts from here. It's here to know. If we are well informed, we will get lots of things that we contributed, we made. And we can prevent what happened to Vancouver in 1950s when the city planners decided this guy that the Negro, they have a colony. There is a small colony of Negro people. They have money. They can stay everywhere, but they will not allow them there because of racism. Anyway, I will stop my story here and see you again. Thank you so much.